I pulled my truck into the driveway, killed the engine, and just sat there in the dark. It was nearly midnight, and the quiet of the night felt heavier than it ever had before. I stared at the unopened, handcrafted walnut jewelry box sitting on my passenger seat, wrapping untouched. Inside were my late mother's handwritten recipe cards, meant to be a heart-filled family gift for my son and his new bride. Instead, it was coming back home with me. About 4 hours earlier, I had been standing right outside a glowing, gorgeous ballroom in Nashville. Through the tall glass doors, I could see my son, Julian, looking handsomer than ever under the crystal chandeliers, posing for pictures beside his bride. People were laughing, waiters were circulating with champagne, and a string quartet was playing softly in the background. But when I reached the front desk, the young wedding coordinator gave me a sympathetic, confused look and told me my name was nowhere on the guest list. I kept thinking there had to be some kind of mistake, so I politely asked her to check again. She double-checked every table assignment on her tablet, only to look up and quietly ask if I wanted her to call someone. Looking through the glass, I saw Julian's new in-laws surrounded by friends, laughing and raising their glasses. I held tight to that wooden box, took a deep breath, and told the coordinator not to worry about it. My name is Clara Vance. I am 66 years old, and that night I finally realized how far my son was willing to go to pretend I did not exist. Driving 4 hours back home in the pitch black gives a person a lot of time to think. I was wearing the dark navy dress I had bought 3 years ago for my husband David's funeral, the one he had lovingly picked out for me before he passed. As the highway stretched out ahead of me, I kept trying to figure out when things between Julian and me had twisted so badly. He was not always a distant person. When David was undergoing chemotherapy, Julian was the dutiful son who would show up every weekend, mow the lawn, and make sure I was never carrying the burden all by myself. Things began to shift a couple of years after Julian started his independent contracting business. Material costs surged. A major commercial contract fell through, and before I knew it, he and his wife were struggling just to keep up with their new home in Tennessee. Seeing my child drowning in stress broke my heart, so I quietly stepped in. Half of their down payment came straight out of my hard-earned retirement savings, and when he panicked a year later about falling behind on his monthly housing costs, I told him not to worry. What was supposed to be a temporary favor quickly turned into a monthly routine. For 3 full years, 36 straight months, I covered his $2,000 mortgage payment directly from my bank account. I was living on a modest fixed pension and Social Security, so taking on his mortgage meant delaying repairs on my house, skipping small trips, and driving an old vehicle past its prime. But I never complained, because, as a mother, you tell yourself that supporting your child through hard times is just what you are supposed to do.
When the formal wedding invitation finally arrived 6 weeks prior, it felt strangely cold. It was a mass-printed card with 0 personal notes, no seating instructions, and no RSVP slip.
When I called Julian to make sure I had received the right envelope, he brushed it off with a casual laugh, telling me everything was handled and to just show up. I drove down early that morning, stopped at a local florist to buy white roses for a small memory table, only to be stopped cold at the front door. Once I got home that night, I walked straight into my quiet house, put the wrapped gift down on the hallway table, and turned on my computer. I logged into my bank account, navigated to the Automatic Transfers tab, and stared at the recurring monthly payments set for my son's house. Without shouting, without tears, and without a single moment of second-guessing, I clicked the button to cancel the automatic transfer. The screen asked if I was completely sure, and for the first time in 3 years, I clicked yes without hesitation. The next morning, I woke up feeling an unexpected sense of relief rather than anger. The weight I had been carrying for 36 months was finally off my shoulders. I poured myself a warm cup of coffee, sat out on the back porch, and watched the morning light hit the trees. For the first time in years, I was no longer sacrificing my own peace of mind to fund an ungrateful illusion. Over the next few weeks, my life returned to a gentle, comfortable rhythm. I spent my Tuesdays volunteering at the local community center, had lunch with old friends on Thursdays, and kept up with my garden. With that extra money staying in my account, I finally hired a contractor to fix my leaking roof and bought myself a decent set of patio chairs. My banker, a lovely woman named Sarah, even made a quiet comment about how much my monthly overhead had lightened, gently reminding me that sometimes holding someone up for too long stops them from learning how to stand on their own feet. Julian never called after the wedding day. He did not call to ask if I made it home safely from the 4-hour drive, nor did he call to ask why I was not sitting at the family table. I kept telling myself maybe there was an explanation, but deep down, the silence said everything words could not. Then, exactly 1 month after the wedding, my phone vibrated while I was standing in the aisle at the grocery store. It was a text from Julian that read 4 simple words: "The mortgage is due." There was no apology, no warm greeting, and not even a simple ask about how I was doing. Staring at that cold message, surrounded by shoppers, I felt a calm certainty wash over me. I finished getting my groceries, drove home, unloaded the bags, and made myself dinner before finally picking up my phone. I typed back a short 6-word response. "I suppose you should pay it." Seconds later, my phone started ringing off the hook. Julian called 4 times in a row, leaving urgent messages that I deliberately chose to ignore. The following morning brought a flood of frantic texts demanding to know why the payment had failed and insisting it was not funny. Even then, his priority was not his relationship with his mother. It was entirely about the money he felt entitled to receive. By 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, a sharp, heavy knock rang out at my front door. When I opened it, Julian was standing on the porch, looking completely disheveled, wearing a wrinkled shirt with dark circles under his eyes. He walked into the living room, glanced around at the old family pictures hanging on the wall, and nervously admitted that his bank told him the account was 30 days overdue. I sat down at the dining table, looked him dead in the eye, and asked him why he thought it was acceptable to leave his own mother standing outside his wedding. Julian stammered through a handful of weak excuses, claiming the event coordinator had mixed up the list and that he was simply too busy over the past month to check in on me. I listened in complete silence until I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a printed email thread. 2 days after the wedding, the heartbroken coordinator had sent me a personal message revealing that my removal was no accident. Julian had personally instructed her to strike my name off the head table to free up extra seats for his wealthy new in-laws. Before Julian could even attempt to craft another lie, the front door opened and his new wife Chloe stepped inside, holding a small box of baked goods. She looked genuinely confused to find him there, but within minutes, the truth completely unraveled in front of her. Chloe had no idea I was the one paying their mortgage for the last 3 years, as Julian had led her and her entire family to believe his business was booming and completely covering their lavish lifestyle. When Chloe read the printed email showing how Julian had deliberately erased my name from the guest list to impress her father, the color completely drained from her face. She looked at him with sheer disgust, realizing the man she had just married was living a giant lie built on manipulation and deep disrespect toward his own family. She walked out to the back porch in tears, leaving Julian sitting alone in total silence at my kitchen table. Julian sat there with his head in his hands, finally facing the reality of everything he had broken. Losing my monthly financial support was suddenly the least of his concerns, as his marriage and his carefully constructed illusion were crumbling around him all at once. I stood up, placed the walnut jewelry box on the table in front of him, and walked out to my porch to breathe in the quiet morning air, knowing that some lessons can only be learned when you finally stop carrying the people who refuse to respect you.